Welcome to the Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, there are 8 million stories in the Naked City, and there are 8 million naked scenes in this movie. This is Summer of Sam. Welcome to the Blast Zone.
Welcome to the Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I'm Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Summer of Sam, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, quick reminder to our beloved listeners, if you guys would leave us a rating or a review, subscribe to the pod, make sure you do that. We appreciate it. It helps new listeners find us.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
But now that we've got the housekeeping done, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Right now, my life is kind of like the summer of 1977 in New York City.
Oh.
I'm sweaty, I'm scared, and I wouldn't be surprised if I suddenly black out for 12 hours.
Well, there you go. I've blacked out for 12 hours recently, but it was self-induced.
Okay. How are you feeling? You ready to do a podcast tonight?
I don't know, man. I'm pretty tired. It's been 100 degrees every day in the Northeast for the past 4 or 5 days. It's brutal. Much like the fabled Summer of Sam, which was the hottest summer on record at the time. I think New York might be losing its title.
Wow.
So my house kind of has AC in some of the rooms, like it has central air, but only for the kitchen and the living room, and everything else is fend for yourself. I've gotten creative with how to cool down while recording because I've got these big, stupid studio headphones on. They make your ears sweat like crazy. If I feel scatterbrained or like I'm having a hard time thinking of words, what just happened right now, then please forgive me. I'll do better next week.
Whatever you're doing, it's better than how I'm doing. My brain just melts down. If I didn't edit this show, people would hear the 20-second silences between the first half and the second half of every sentence I speak.
But for me, they're just suspenseful. They make you into a great storyteller because I'm always on the edge of my seat. It's exciting.
It's a style.
But before we get into Summer of Sam, because it is a movie with a lot to talk about, did you happen to watch anything else this week you wanted to bring to the viewers?
I did. I watched something that I'm begrudgingly talking about because I didn't watch a lot this week, but I watched The Black Phone, brand new movie, and we talked about it last episode, and we were both excited for it, and I think maybe my expectations were too high. I didn't love it. I'm sorry to tell you this live on air. It's got an enjoyable premise, as we knew. Most people who are interested in this movie have heard somewhat about the premise. Very Stephen King-esque concept for this movie, which makes sense.
Written by his son, right?
His son, Joe Hill, wrote this, and so it's very Stephen King-y, so it's got a lot of fun, familiar things to latch on to. It's got the school-age kids and these protagonists, a brother and sister who seem to have inherited some Shining-like powers, maybe, from their mom. So you're like, oh, this is pure Stephen King stuff. Then the way they execute it in the movie, they're kind of going through the motions, and they didn't actually give me a hook that really brought me into the premise. I'm like, oh yeah, that's happening because they said it was going to happen. But I'm like, it didn't make sense. It's just kind of happening. The way it's written, it's almost like on this kids show level of the sophistication of the writing. I don't know. I wasn't really feeling it. And then when it does try to thrill you, the thrills are kind of like cheap scares and stuff. And hopefully I'm doing a public service by lowering our listeners' expectations of this movie. And when they see it, they'll be like, what is he talking about? It was totally good. But I just was like a little underwhelmed.
Yeah, I hope you're wrong, but I wouldn't be shocked if you're not. I go back and forth on Scott Derrickson as a director. I think he's made some good stuff, but some stuff that underwhelmed me too. I am a big Joe Hill fan, but so far I don't think I've really seen one of his books or short stories brought to the screen in a really satisfactory way. My favorite book of his is Nosferatu, but it's written like a license plate, NOS, the number 4, A, the number 2, which is a very spooky book that I enjoyed a lot, but they made a show based on it starring Zachary Quinto in the lead role and Eben Moss-Backrack, who we both loved on The Bear. Like, really good cast based on a story I love, and the show just did nothing for me. So I don't know how much, maybe there's just something about his writing that's very tough to translate to screen. And it always has a childlike menace to it. Like, the villains in his stories tend to be very childlike. There's not a lot of depth to them. They typically are cardboard cutouts of evil people. He also wrote Horns, which I believe Daniel Radcliffe starred in the adaptation of, and I was not a fan of that. For whatever reason, they're just not hitting with me when they get brought to the big screen or the little screen.
Kind of disappointing. Black Phone had so much promise just in the look of the villain.
The Grabber, maybe the silliest name for a villain in recent memory.
Speaking of childlike villains.
The Grabber. It sounds like a toy from the 80s.
Exactly. The Grabber is the guy who would be haunting McDonaldland, not suburban Denver.
Talking about childlike things, I watched a movie that was not accidentally childlike. It was intended that way. Full disclosure, I did not have a lot of time to watch non-Blast Zone related media this week. I'm rewatching Justified to prepare myself for City Primeval.
Okay.
I can't bring that to show and tell because I bring a mini version of that to show and tell almost every week. But I did find some time to watch Lightyear with my son, who's a big Toy Story fan. We wanted to go see it in theaters. I feel like it came and went from theaters kind of quick. With COVID still being a concern, I didn't want to take him on opening weekend when every seat in the house is going to be packed. I like to kind of sit in the back. And then when I finally started looking at showtimes, it wasn't playing anywhere. I was like, oh, they really dumped this one onto Disney Plus as fast as they possibly could. But you know what? I really liked it. And so did he. We enjoyed it quite a bit.
Oh, cool.
It's much more of a PG movie than a G movie compared to the Toy Story movies, which I think skew more G. But it was marketed like that. And he's at an age where that's fine. And in fact, I think he prefers that at this point. The beginning's really funny. There's a lot of good laughs in it while being kind of like a MCU style action movie. The star of the show is an animatronic cat named Socks. I don't want to spoil anything, but he's the best character in a Pixar movie in quite a while, in my opinion.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think it's a good way for kids who enjoyed the Toy Story movies when they were like 3 or 4 or 5 to kind of grow up with the series in a way. It's a little more mature, a little more action oriented in a real way with explosions and laser guns and swords. Still, obviously still very bloodless and nothing to be scared of. But it feels like a bridge between two types of movies that kids like. The super childlike early Toy Story films, which were kind of straightforward and had a lot of recognizable toys, and kids kind of responded to it just for that. And then more like action focused, but still bloodless kids movies that might appeal to 6 through 10-year-olds. It's kind of a nice utility. You can show a kid that and see how they react to it and decide what they're ready to see from there.
Yeah, I know you tried to jump that gap last week with the first Ninja Turtles movie, and you jumped too far.
Too far.
And landed somewhere you didn't want to be. It sounds like you hit the sweet spot this week.
Right. There's going to be a difference between live action and cartoon. Even if the content was the same, I feel like it would just seem less scary as a cartoon. So
that's true.
It makes a difference. But yeah, the first Ninja Turtles, probably try that again in a year or two. A Lightyear for right now. Yeah, that's 2 weeks in a row I'm bringing children's movies. And I'm sorry about that.
It's a family show, folks.
I got 2 kids that take up a lot of my time. And this wasn't a movie I could sneak in during the day. So every time the kids went to bed, I would squeeze in some Summer of Sam watching. And it's a long movie, man. It took me like 3 nights to get through my first watch of it. And I just did a second watch at 1.5 speed.
We've been giving ourselves a lot of long homework recently.
I know.
But we're chewing through it.
We're getting there, man.
This one was good. It got you started, but as they all are, that's hard to finish.
Yeah, Summer of Sam. What did you remember about this movie before you sat down to watch it? And also, what's your impression of Spike Lee as a filmmaker overall?
I remembered very little about this movie except the fact that it existed. I looked back over Spike Lee's filmography and I'm like, you know what? I don't think I watched as many Spike Lee movies as I thought I had. I think a lot of them in a period with Jungle Fever, Mo Better Blues. I think I maybe just absorbed those as part of popular culture without ever really watching them from start to finish. I maybe caught bits of them. So I'm definitely not going to pretend I'm any kind of Spike Lee expert at all, but I tried to orient myself so I understood what he's about and what he was trying to do here. And yeah, this movie was fresh and new to me, so it was fun. And frankly, I'm much better prepared to absorb a Spike Lee movie today than I would have been at the time this came out.
He's an interesting filmmaker. His career is very full of real gambles, movies that just seemed like huge risks. And then he has some that are very straightforward studio movies. And I think this was kind of in between the two. It's telling a story that everyone's familiar with, at least on the surface level. They've heard of Son of Sam.
Sure.
They know about the 44 caliber killer in New York. It casts recognizable stars, John Leguizamo, Mira Sorvino. Adrien Brody wasn't quite a star yet. His big break was yet to come. It felt like a play for commercialism in a sense, but then you watch it and you're like, oh no, he was still taking a lot of risks with this movie and making something that was very much his own.
Yeah, he was doing his thing. This is about shit he cares about, which is the Yankees. Might not have realized they were going to play such a big role in this movie about some young disco dancers and a serial killer. But yeah, Yankees third build on the actual credits.
Yeah, this was his take on making a movie about the Bronx is burning. It's not really about the Son of Sam. It's just about what a powder keg New York City was at the time. Hysteria and paranoia and fear and hate. It seemed like a very scary place. I wasn't there yet. I was not a twinkle in anyone's eye. It doesn't feel a lot like the New York I grew up in a lot of ways, but in other ways, it's very recognizable. But then Lee Lee will make a movie like Inside Man, which feels like a very by the numbers in some ways studio movie, but then he always throws his flourishes in there. Like you can always identify it as a Spike Lee movie in some way. He's got his bag of tricks he likes to go back to. I think there's value in that, especially in this day and age where it feels like a lot of movies are being made by assembly line. A Spike Lee movie will always feel like a Spike Lee movie.
I could feel that he cares. He cares about movies. He's trying to do stuff. He puts some heart into his movies. He also has opinions that you may not agree with, so he might put stuff in there that can really rub you the wrong way. But there's a feeling like somebody who cared about movies made this movie. Felt like that jumped out of the screen to me.
Speaking to your other point, though, about he puts some things in just because like they're things he feels strongly about and he wants you to feel strongly about them too. You could definitely see that. It reminds me a little bit of Quentin Tarantino, but where Quentin Tarantino characters monologue about Elvis or Like a Virgin by Madonna, pop culture. Lee
Right.
wants to like voice his opinions through characters about more consequential subjects. So it can feel a little jarring and almost like it's shoehorned in there sometimes. I do get that vibe from a lot of dialogue in his movies. Like these characters are just delivery systems. But there's usually a handful of scenes in any one movie that applies to, and then the rest of it is just a movie.
In this movie, I would say the characters are pretty genuine. Some of the side characters kind of bring stuff into it. Notably, the real side characters, one played by Spike Lee.
Like John Jeffries, am I remembering that correctly?
That sounds about right. And then Jimmy Breslin, New York newspaper writer, playing himself. Absolutely shoehorned into this movie. No business being there.
It's so tonally jarring to have the intro and outro from Jimmy Breslin. None of it feels appropriate for the movie we just watched. First of all, it feels like 10 years too late to do that bumper. Like that's like a storytelling device that was way out of vogue by the time this movie came out. The movie is just, it has nothing to do with that intro. It threw me off, way off.
Spike had another set of agenda points that he had to accomplish while making this movie that's a really interesting relationship movie. It has a ton to say about young people in this era and in general. And then Jimmy Breslin has nothing to say about young people.
This is a story about New York City. And I'm Jimmy Breslin. That's basically what his intro amounts to. Thanks, I guess. Yeah. But you're right. This movie is really about relationships, and particularly sexual dysfunction is a big part of this movie. Probably in 77, I don't think people were as knowledgeable about like sex addiction. And even still, it's kind of considered a pseudoscience by a lot of people. It's kind of a hard thing to pin down and diagnose. But yeah, like we're dealing with some characters who clearly have some real sexual hangups and don't know how to work them out. And it's kind of tragic to see, but yeah, what the fuck's that to do with Jimmy Breslin?
Yeah, and the economy and the Yankees.
And the mob is shoehorned in here in a kind of clumsy way that never really pays off. I thought that was kind of shoehorned in and a little unnecessary. We'll get into it though. There's a lot of stuff that could have been cut from this movie, but overall, I think we both mostly like it.
Yeah, I like a lot about it, but it's a big pill to swallow. So I can't recommend it for everybody in every situation, but I'll definitely have a lot of good things to say. And if those things resonate with you, the listener, you might end up wanting to switch this on sometime.
Do you want me to get into the making of the movie?
Yeah, let's hear how this thing happened.
All right. By the time the summer of 1999 rolled around, Spike Lee was reeling from a string of critical and commercial failures.
The films had him reeling. Hey-o.
Of his first 6 films, released between 1986 and 1992, only Mo Better Blues failed to double its budget. He would then release Crooklyn, Clockers, Girl 6, Get on the Bus, and He Got Game, and while all but Girl 6 received positive reviews, they all failed to make a profit at the box office. Summer of Sam was an attempt to break the cycle, focusing on a series of events most Americans were familiar with on at least a cursory level, the Son of Sam murders that rocked New York City in the late 1970s. David Berkowitz killed 6 and wounded 9 people from winter of 1975 to summer of 1977, particularly targeting young white females, some who were with a friend or boyfriend in the car at the time of the attack. Spike's movie wouldn't focus on Berkowitz too heavily, rather using him as a framing device to explore mob mentality, scapegoating, and the excesses of the 1970s. Together with Vincent Colicchio and Michael Imperioli, Lee wrote the script, which was wrapped up by Halloween of 1997 and went about casting the film. Imperioli was meant to play Richie, but dropped out as The Sopranos was picked up and he could only commit to a smaller role as Midnight.
Smart move. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, gabagool.
Jennifer Esposito was cast in the role of Diana, and Sarah Michelle Gellar was offered the role of Ruby, but when she turned it down, Esposito took over as Ruby, and Mira Sorvino was hired as Diana. John Leguizamo was cast to play Vinny, originally a smaller role, but Lee was impressed with him and expanded the role to be a co-lead with Richie, who was now being played by Adrien Brody. Filmed around various locations in New York City in the summer of 1998, the film was even controversial during production. Rumor has it Lee changed the script under pressure from the families of Berkowitz's victims to focus less on the killer, and filming in some Italian-American neighborhoods led to racist notes and messages from local residents that were unhappy that Lee was making a movie in their area.
To be fair, they were worried Spike might want to burn down their pizza shop.
Despite all that, the movie was given a blockbuster release date of July 2nd, 1999, debuting against past episode and Will Smith action-adventure steampunk sci-fi piece of shit Wild Wild West.
Wild Wild West, Jim West, piece of doo-doo.
Critics were quite literally split as the film sits at 51% on Rotten Tomatoes, but audiences absolutely hated the movie, giving it a D- cinema score. For reference, only about 50 movies have ever earned an F or D- on Cinema Score. Lee would get a hit in 2002 with the Ed Norton Last Night Before Prison drama The 25th Hour, and he's still going strong today, but Summer of Sam is a mostly forgotten 90s relic at this point.
It's interesting that there was pressure on Spike Lee to pull more of the Son of Sam stuff out of this, focus less on the killer. And it kind of does, but the movie is so long that it actually still focuses quite a bit on the killer. And that's one of my main complaints. It's like, you could have pared it back even more.
Yes.
The killer deserves to be a sort of a specter that stays in the shadows and haunts these people. But we spent a lot of time in his apartment, which is not a nice place to hang out. By the end of the movie, we've had a little too much of him. And it doesn't seem to add to the movie after we know what kind of threat he is. That's all we really need to know about him.
Also, maybe not the greatest actor playing Berkowitz. He comes off as like funny sometimes. Like I found myself laughing at him, and not in the obvious scene, which I know we're going to talk about when it comes up, which is hilarious in a certain way.
Yeah.
But even he's just like this crazy guy screaming like, shut that dog up over and over again. It veers into like silliness after a while. But it's kind of an interesting parallel to draw with Bad Times at the El Royale. We kind of said the same thing about Billy Lee, played by Chris Hemsworth in that movie. It was like the early shots of him, they worked. They kind of set him up as this big bad. We were scared of him appropriately. He felt like a impending doom in flesh. But then the movie spends more and more time with him as the movie goes on, and it weakens his grip on the audience. And we theorize that might have been Goddard's intent as a way to kind of show how diminished these cult figures can get the more time you spend with them. I wonder if that was Lee's goal as well. I can't say for sure.
I was ready to buy that in the Goddard case. Here, I can't really buy that's where Lee was going, that he was trying to humiliate this guy. I just think he was fascinated with him, and there was a lot of real world stuff to work from, shit that he wrote in his letters and his diaries that they found, the way they found his apartment. There's a lot of stuff, and he was just like, oh, this is all cool, creepy detail. Let me put more of it in my movie. And it was just a little too much. Michael Badalucco, who plays David Berkowitz in this, you might know him from The Practice. He has a very distinctive voice, and yeah, he's just screaming at a dog endlessly.
It's also had long been debunked by the time this movie came out. I wasn't sure when Berkowitz admitted that he made most of that shit up, but it was pretty soon after he was arrested, and this movie just treats it as if he's really having these conversations with this dog, really feeling possessed to go out and kill. That is not true. He walked all of that back pretty soon after he was arrested.
And it's fine for Spike Lee to take artistic license, but it's much easier to take that license if you leave the guy in the shadows and you go, this is an impressionistic version of the killer who, yes, it seems like you may believe that a dog is telling him to do these killings. But then Spike goes pretty literal with it. We'll get to that in the third act.
Just want a supercut of somebody taking Jesus's lines from The Big Lebowski and editing them over the dog's lines in this movie.
Very beloved and prestigious actor. Got to play a dog in this movie.
All right, do you want to walk us through the first leg of the movie so we can start talking about some of these things we're alluding to?
Let's jump right in. It's the summer of 1977, and New York City is beset by the .44 caliber killer, also known as the Son of Sam. Everyone is freaking out, especially Vinny, played by John Leguizamo. Vinny had a close brush with the killer one night while cheating on his wife, Deanna, played by Mira Sorvino. Then, Vinny's old friend Richie, played by Adrien Brody, shows up in the neighborhood with a punk haircut and an affected British accent. He gets a lot of shit from the neighborhood regulars, except for the notoriously promiscuous Ruby, played by Jennifer Esposito. Ruby thinks Richie's cute, and the two of them start dating. Meanwhile, the desperate cops working the case go to a local mob boss for help finding the killer.
This first section of the movie, I think we agreed, is pretty solid. It seems to have the least amount of Berkowitz in his apartment screaming, which is our least favorite part of the movie. Yeah. And it just kind of sets the stage really well. It gives us the lay of the land. Adrien Brody's doing a terrible British accent, but I feel like he was trying to do a terrible accent.
Yeah, I thought that was good acting. And yeah, I checked the time on the screen. Within 10 minutes, we've met the couple who are at the center of this film, plus their friend circle. We've seen a demonstration of their loving relationship and the infidelity that's going to wreck it. We've met the killer. We've seen him do 2 sets of murders. And the hero, the Leguizamo hero, Vinny, has been thrown into his big crisis for the film all at the 10-minute mark. Like, this movie is moving fast and you're thrilled within the first 10 minutes.
It's strange how this movie's paced because it is rapid fire in the beginning and then it slows down considerably after that. We talked after we'd both watched like the first half hour, like, I really like this movie. This is going to be a great movie. And then we ended up a little cooler on the movie than that, but not by too much. Let's talk about Vinny and Deanna. They sure do love to dance. There's a lot of
do.
dancing in this movie.
Yeah, that's another thing the movie does is illustrate the disco era. These kids are all about it. That's their lifestyle. They go out to their disco club on Saturday night and just tear up the dance floor.
I wonder if you just made a supercut of the dancing scenes in this movie, how long would it be? My guess is 38 minutes long.
That seems correct.
I did not realize how important a role dancing played in this movie. And the dancing's fine, but it's just not what you expect when you go into a movie about David Berkowitz and the Bronx in 77.
It absolutely flips the tone. We start with Jimmy Breslin. He's saying some facts about New York. And then all of a sudden, we're in a discotheque and this gorgeous couple who can dance their asses off. It's tearing up the dance floor. And then the movie goes surreal. They're in this crowded dance floor and all of a sudden they're alone. There's a fully surreal dance sequence where the floor is mystically empty because it represents the intense bond the two of them have when dancing, that it's just the two of them and they're alone on this crowded dance floor. And it's great, but it's such a flippant tone. And most of the movie is more in that surreal impressionistic tone, thankfully, because it's actually fun. So you got to go with Spike Lee there and like, ride that wave.
It's surreal and impressionistic until they're done dancing. And Mira Sorvino's like, hey, go get me a BLT with mustard, which I was just taken aback. I've never heard that sandwich order. A BLT, but with mustard instead of mayonnaise. And I like BLTs, but I hate mayonnaise. So I usually just get them dry.
Okay.
Juice from the tomato is enough to moisten the sandwich. But is a BLT with mustard good? Can any of our listeners chime in on this? Also, was she just going to eat it on the fucking dance floor? They're in a club. Would they even let him in with a sandwich?
I actually love that about it because it's a real neighborhood place, right? All their same friends who hang out at the dead end of the street during the day hang out at one end of the bar at night. It's not just a ritzy, glamorous nightclub. They're fucking just eating sandwiches there because that's their life. They live there.
Was that the 70s equivalent of like a townie bar? Was the local dance hall?
I thought it was really cute. Like, to me, that was more of like the cute relationship stuff that she asked her hubby to pick up a sandwich for her and bring it back to the bar.
And good for John Leguizamo, my fellow short king. He's got to be like 5'4" because Mira Sorvino is not a giant and she just towers over him in this movie.
She's a lovely, elegant, tall woman. They both look great, though. They're amazing. I was sold on this couple right away. The dashing figures they cut on the dance floor. It's a cute, convincing little relationship. And then you right away learn it's not as good as it seems because he's a fuck up. He's taken her cousin home and decides to have sex with her in the car.
Her Italian cousin. We should talk a little bit about Mira Sorvino. We will talk more about her at the end. But this is a tough role because you need to kind of be a little bit of a babe in the woods. You know, the entire neighborhood knows what Vinny's up to, but she can't. But you don't just want to be a pushover and an idiot. And it's a hard balance to strike. And I think she does it, which is pretty impressive because it's a tough spot to be in as an actor.
Well, that's a great observation. And yeah, I thought she exactly struck that right note where she was kind of a smart, tough girl, but just flawed like everybody else in this. And all these performances are great. These aren't actors that I've spent that much time with, but Leguizamo and Sorvino and Adrien Brody and Jennifer Esposito all just put in really cool performances.
Leguizamo, he'd already kind of earned his stripes as a bona fide dramatic actor because of Carlito's Way, at least. That's a smaller part, but he's integral to the plot. He got a lot of press from that movie. But I can't imagine this movie without Vinny in the driver's seat. This just being Richie's story, I don't think it works. It's an interesting tidbit that Vinny was originally more of a secondary character and was written in to be the co-lead basically during production.
That's kind of amazing because he's much more at the center of this movie. Richie has a huge role to play, but he's kind of like a foil for Vinny, and he has so much less screen time. And even when he's on screen, he doesn't like to talk, so he says very few lines total.
Yeah, his character's kind of unknowable.
I mean, Brody pulled him off great, and you kind of hang on his every word because he doesn't say very much. Vinny talks a mile a minute, and he's fantastic too. He's like a really compelling character.
You blew my fucking mind when you told me how old John Leguizamo was in this movie. He's playing like 22, 23, right? Is that what we were supposed to believe?
That's what I feel like based on where these people are in their lives and what they're up to.
How old was he during the making of this movie?
I blew my own mind. I looked it up. He was 39 when this came out, born in 1960.
He's 62 years old right now?
Yeah.
He was in John Wick Part 2 not that long ago. He looked like he was in his mid-40s then.
At 39, he plays 22 just totally convincing. There's no doubt that he's a young 20-something. Brody is, I forgot, 27, 28 around this time, so he's not stretching himself.
Adrien Brody also looks exactly the same today if you see him. He was on Succession this latest season. It was like, still looks as he looked when he was forcibly kissing Halle Berry during his Oscar speech against her will.
Yikes.
Yeah, that kind of soured me on Adrien Brody a little bit. Good actor, though.
I guess I forgot about that incident.
Oh, sorry.
I knew there was something that I wasn't supposed to like about Adrien Brody, and I honestly hadn't seen a lot of Adrien Brody movies, so he was kind of like a fresh face for me in this. And yeah, as an actor, very compelling. As a person, I will not necessarily stand up for him.
Yeah, I believe he's apologized, but that was still a creepy thing to do.
Yeah, Yeah.
He won an Oscar for The Pianist, a movie I still haven't seen. Have you seen it?
No, I thought you were saying he won it for his penis, which is commented on in this movie by the Michael Imperioli characters telling Ruby that you're lucky.
He's got a very nice cock, great shape, with his weird frog voice. I think that's the line. It's something very similar to that.
No, that was pretty good.
Michael Imperioli is funny because he was cast as Christopher on The Sopranos, which is the role that has obviously defined his career. He's been good in other stuff, but he really is like a weird little dude who just wants to play parts like this, I think. But he was cast as like a tough mobster for almost 10 years, and it was like probably torture.
I'm older and I never actually watched The Sopranos, which comes up on this show every other episode. But for me, he's still, I thought you said Spider, I'm all right, Spider. That's just him. He'll always be that kid who gets shot in the foot and then killed.
Oh, man. Actually, his character on The Sopranos is very similar to Spider, just grown up and with a little more power. Like a bit of a fuck up.
Nice.
You should watch The Sopranos, obviously, though. I don't feel like I need to say that
Obviously,
anymore.
for that reason alone, just to see Spider grow up instead of get buried.
Also, our boy Moochie, Michael Rispoli, who's big in this movie. He plays a little drug dealer, lead henchman of the drug dealing crew. Joey T. That's Moochie, a.k.a. Spinner from Death to Smoochie. And he's a big part of season 1 of The Sopranos as well.
Okay.
There's a lot of Sopranos crossover in this movie. I can't list them all. It would take forever.
Yeah. Can we talk about some of the other filmmaking flourishes in this movie? Because those also happen in this first act that really caught my attention. It's part of why I said I felt the heart of Spike Lee coming through this movie. So this movie's made in 99. It looks like a 70s movie on purpose, right? It's got this very grainy film action going on. It's got a lot of echoes of Scorsese, I felt.
I could see that.
But then there's some really cool camera work, but it has this interesting thing going on where it's trying to be kind of epic, but it's also low budget because it starts out with this sweeping crane shot. The Italian-American characters live in this neighborhood. They hang out at this dead end. And the camera comes sweeping over from the neighboring swimming pool and down to the dead end. And it's like a beautiful shot, great establishing shot of this neighborhood. But the camera makes this big dramatic wobble when it gets to the top of the crane. That's not on purpose. No one's camera goes whoop, 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 whoop during a sweeping epic crane shot. But you got to wonder, like, how did Spike Lee leave that in his movies? Okay, this is the best we can do. We're doing something cool. We're evoking a certain very stylish kind of filmmaking. And yet, this is the shot we got. And the same thing happens. There's a bunch of handheld shots at the beginning of the movie that handheld camera work is used when you want to establish an emotive ground level sort of feeling with these characters in some of these more emotionally excited moments. And the camera's following someone running through the street. But like, they didn't use a steady cam. The camera literally jerks with every footfall of the cameraman. It calls attention to the camera person who's running with this camera to catch up with Vinny or whoever. And I'm like, there's these things that they're doing that all of a sudden feel low budget. And I guess we haven't talked about the budget of this movie, but it made me wonder what's going on there.
The $22 million budget is not huge.
No, I guess not.
But it's not tiny either, especially for a movie that didn't have a lot of special effects. This is really just a character drama.
That's true.
There's a couple gore shots that you need squibs for or whatever, but not much. And
yeah, those are real basic.
I wonder what the intentionality was behind that, if there was any. I know you said you don't suspect that he was doing any of that on purpose, but like, he's a competent filmmaker and he's a showy filmmaker too. None of his movies are just shot straightforward conversations between two people. He's not like Jonathan Demme, who is showy in his own way, but his camera is pretty stationary typically. Spike's always been all over the canvas with his camera. And I think he's a skilled enough director to have recognized that stuff when he was filming it. But I don't know. It was a chaotic shoot. Who knows?
Yeah, it could just be that.
Maybe it was too late to go back for reshoots and they just didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah, they had to run with what they had.
I did notice that wobble though, because it's like a Spielberg crane shot. You'd expect to see one of his early movies and then it just like jerks to the left.
Yeah, it's weird, but it's fun. Like, I know what you're saying with his dialogue scenes. They're very stylish. And I noticed it in the sex scenes. There's a lot of them in this movie, and you'd start to take note of how they shoot them in order to preserve the actors' comfort level and modesty, what they're going to show. And those are really creative too. Like, those are beautifully executed in terms of the framing and how they hide things. And these conversation scenes with the group of boys at the dead end of the street, some of them feel like shots from West Side Story, where Leguizamo's in the middle and characters are popping up over one shoulder and the other shoulder and bouncing back and forth with their little comebacks and comments. It feels very theatrical at points.
I almost made that comparison. I'm glad you did. I almost brought up West Side Story. Yeah, it evoked that feeling at a few different times.
And all that's supposed fun. I liked that. That's where I feel like Spike Lee's putting some heart into this movie. He's making references. I dug it. I like the effort.
And that dead end, they hang out in Bronx. That seems like a fun place to hang out if you were like in your early 20s, just got nothing to do.
Totally.
And that's where we meet Ruby. She pulls up. She's with a boyfriend at the time, and he's not being a gentleman, let's say. He's being a little brusque with her. Do you know who played that gentleman, Ron?
Can't be anybody that we know.
It's Joe Joseph Lyle Taylor, a.k.a. corrupt Bennett County Sheriff Doyle Bennett from season 2 of Justified. And that's our Justified crossover of the week.
Justified crossover of the week.
Wow.
I was nervous. I didn't think we were going to get one this week. And he's not like a small role in Justified either. He's not some bit player that came in for one scene. He's like the secondary villain of an entire season of the show.
That's legit.
Most of the actors Spike Lee casts are based out of New York, and this guy never struck me as like a New York guy, but we got one in there. Under the Wire. I don't think we're going to see any in next week's, unfortunately. I did a quick search. Not coming up with anything. So take a week off. It happens.
Yeah.
But then there's Ruby. They're all kind of mean to her because I guess she's had a few partners in her time.
Yeah.
But Jennifer Esposito is very charming. I've always liked her as an actress.
She has a real sweetness about her, which is cool for this character who, they call her Ruby the Skank. They're very mean to her. And you're like, yeah, but this is an absolute sweetheart of a girl as soon as you meet her. And so it's a great contrast in that character, and she's really likable.
It does kind of plant a seed in this scene with Ron that she maybe is like a bit of a chameleon when she's dating people. She's dressed kind of in line with what he would expect a woman he's dating to dress like, a little more like preppy, a little country clubby. And then when she starts dating Richie later, she kind of takes on a lot of his characteristics and how she's dressed and her lifestyle.
She absolutely does. That's a great catch. I just caught on my second watch, there's actually a scene where she comes out of a big moment with him and goes, let me borrow some money because I need to change my entire wardrobe. I forget how she says it, but she
needs $50 to change her style.
Yeah, like these disco clothes. That's not me anymore. I'm punk rock now. Let's go shopping. And you're right. She's a chameleon.
And not 2 weeks later, she's the lead singer of a punk rock band.
Amazing transformation.
Just follow your dreams, guys. That's what the moral of the story is.
A lot happens in this first act. Yeah. We find out that Vinny's a serial cheater. He gets this shock when he has a brush with the killer. And then he's like, oh, this is God telling me I got to change my ways. And he won me over as a character. The way he expresses his love, his earnestness, it's trying to make up to Diana and tell her how much he loves her. It's all really cute, and she's really cute in responding to him.
It's cute in the moment, but we come to find out all it means is that he's just going to feel even worse about it when he cheats on her. Yeah, Vinny does make a lot of grand proclamations, and he's not going to stick to them.
No.
But the movie seems to be treating what's going on with him as more pathological. He really cannot help himself. He's got kinks. Head just can't be satisfied by his sweet, more traditional wife.
That's his real problem, and that's their real problem, is that he has this false belief, which is great classic protagonist character stuff. He has a false belief that he can't have the sex he wants with his wife because that's his wife and that's a sin, and you don't do that kind of stuff with your wife, and the only way to get it is by going outside the marriage, which is ruining their marriage. And spoiler alert, the movie's kind of a tragedy. It doesn't really end well for anybody.
No, and there's no title cards at the end catching us up on where they all went. We just have to kind of draw our own conclusions, and none of them are really good.
No, but I like that about it too.
Yeah. And then so we do get the scene with Luigi and his familia of mafioso having some lunch with the detectives working the Son of Sam case. The cops are coming to him asking for help. It's entirely possible something like this actually went down, but I feel like the movie doesn't need it at this time. It feels like a subplot that goes nowhere.
Especially because it almost establishes that this one cop, the Italian-American cop who's from the neighborhood, who knows the mob boss, that's going to be a secondary protagonist in this movie, but he's really not.
No.
He's just kind of in and out. And so they spend a lot of time setting this up for very little payoff.
And during that scene, they make allusions to the fact that I think his name's Detective Petrocelli. They're like, oh, he used to do errands for me when he was a kid. Kind of insinuating that maybe you can't trust this guy to his partner. Like he might still have one foot in this world. And again, it never amounts to anything. It feels like Spike just trying to add some like flavor to the neighborhood and the surroundings. I understand why Luigi's here because he's the guy freaking out about the killer and he can kind of get people worked up into a froth over this thing. But like Michael Rispoli's character can do that just as well.
Right.
You don't need to have the big bad guy in the background with his hand on the throne. It doesn't feel true to this neighborhood in this movie that they've set up, which is very kind of insular and low level. Joey T's the big guy of this group. And what is he sells the worst looking weed that anyone's ever smoked.
It's very sad. 1970s style weed.
I don't know how much of that weed I'd have to smoke to feel anything at this point in my life. But these guys are low lives. They're shitheads. They're little dirtbags. But then they have this grand guy in his mansion. I don't know. It throws everything out of whack for me.
It's unnecessary filigree. And it would make more sense, like we talked about, that maybe Spike Lee started with a movie that had a full-on detective murder story as a backbone, along with kids discovering themselves movie, which it is at the same time. But I mean, he paired enough of it back to deconstruct the crime-solving story, which is barely there. There's just a little breadcrumbs of it there. But then he left these big scenes in that would make sense if you're going to follow follow this detective and make his problem one of our problems, but he kind of don't. So it's like, why did you even start me down that road?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I reference a lot where it feels like that was part of the first draft of the screenplay and the one they shot was a fourth draft, but they just kind of forgot to take that out.
Yeah, it's an editing thing. If we were there with Spike in the editing room, we would have said, buddy, you got to lose some big chunks and we'll get a tighter movie and it'll focus on the kids and people will eat it up.
Clearly, we know what's best. All right, you ready to walk through the second part of this movie?
Yeah, let us know what happened next.
All right. Vinny continues to cheat on Deanna, even though he worries God will use the son of Sam to punish him for it. Richie and Ruby bond, and he shows her his secret side gig, erotic dancing in a gay theater. Local drug dealer Joey T and his boys think the killer comes from their neighborhood, so they start a list of son of Sam suspects, and they put Richie on it. Vinny and Richie try to have a heart-to-heart conversation, but it's broken up when some diner patrons start a fight with Richie over his punk rock appearance. Meanwhile, the city is shaken by more Son of Sam murders, plus a massive blackout that leads to riots and looting. Vinny and Deanna try to go to see Richie's band perform, but they get scared off by the looks of the crowd at CBGB's. They end up getting dragged to the famous swingers club Plato's Retreat, where they get high and have sex with other partners, which leads to a big blow-up fight over their ongoing sex and infidelity issues, all of which I would like to note are one-sided.
Yeah.
You ever been to CBGB's, Ian? It feels like a place you would have been to. You never have.
No,
huh?
I never had the pleasure.
I have.
How about you?
It's quite smelly. It's gone now,
okay.
But yeah,
Okay.
I went towards the end of its run. It was a place to go. It felt historical being there.
Yeah, sure.
It didn't smell historical. It smelled terrible. Very dirty place. But I was a fan of the punk rock bands for a few years of my youth, and I thought it would be a fun place to go see a show. And it was. I'm glad I did, because now it's gone.
That's neat. I don't suppose you ever made it over to Plato's Retreat.
I'm not fucking telling you about it if I did. No, I've never made it to Plato's Retreat. I'm sure it was long gone by the time I was of age. It doesn't look very fun here. It looks pretty upsetting.
It's pretty harsh. It's definitely one of the harshest points of this movie, which gets harsher towards the end. But yeah, a lot of stuff happens in this middle section. We tried to condense it so we could just touch on everything, but it's just a lot. And not a lot of it moves the plot or moves it in new directions. It does kind of enhance the plot. Each time there's another episode of infidelity and covering up and feeling bad about it and trying to talk about it with your friends. And like that circles around for a while.
It's true that there's a lot of stuff that goes in circles in this middle section.
Yeah.
Like we can see what's happening with Richie and the neighborhood guys starting to suspect him. But like, how many conversations do we need of John Leguizamo like arguing with people that Richie's not the son of Sam? I feel like there's at least 5 of them in this movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
And then you cut it in with the 28-minute disco dancing scenes. There's a lot of fluff in this movie.
Yeah, this is maybe the time. Can I lay on you my master grand theory of this movie?
By all means.
This is not my final thought, but this is my middle thought, which is this is kind of just a forgotten middling movie at this point. But I think it would be an absolutely elite HBO limited series. Think about what it's got in this movie. It's got everything you need in an HBO limited series. A serial killer. It's got Italian-American mobsters that's in a gritty urban setting. It's full of juicy period details and tons of hip music for the soundtrack, and it's wall-to-wall sex. It is absolutely an HBO limited series. And think about all these scenes that we just talked through in this section of the movie. There's the night they go out to CBGB's and end up getting dragged to a swingers club. There's the blackout episode, right? That's incredible to think about if you have an HBO season and one episode takes on this real life thing from New York history and shows how your characters get affected by the great New York blackout of 1977. The Killer's Anniversary Night. That's another episode right there of your HBO show. And it speaks well of the movie because it says that, hey, the movie is arranged in these nice little sequences that you can track in this way, but it's too much for a single movie. And I can see where I bogged down audiences, especially in 1999. But like now, this would be all the rage. Everyone would be like, I just binged Summer of Sam last night and it was fucking awesome. Yeah,
and it's funny because HBO had The Deuce not too long ago, which was set in like the seedy underbelly of New York City. And the second season takes place in 1977 through 78. It starts at the tail end of where this movie ends. So we don't get the full Styrian buildup to it. But I couldn't agree more that this would be a great season of television on HBO. Spike has a working relationship with them. He produced When the Levees Broke with them about Hurricane Katrina. So not that it doesn't work as a movie. And I'm sick of saying this should have been a TV show because we need movies. We're running out of movies, I feel like. But this is one where I think you're dead on. This would have been an absolutely home run by Reggie Jackson.
The way the characters circle the same emotional drain, it's very much like episodic TV, right? Where your characters can't quite break out and they keep having different incidents that highlight their same issues and they try to come back and then they fall short again. It's got all that.
And for whatever reason, we tolerate that on television more than we do in movies. We wouldn't really say, well, they're just covering the same ground over and over again on a TV show because there it's character building. In a movie, I guess you expect it to be more propulsive and it feels a little repetitive. So yeah, I think everything about this movie, from the way it's paced to it's almost set up like little vignettes like mini chapters within the acts. Feels very much like it could have been a great show. So well done, Ian.
Thank you.
So we talk about Richie and Ruby. He brings her to his sex club, and is he sleeping with these clients? It seems like he is.
He's doing something. He is going upstairs after the show, and some of the gentlemen from the theater seats are following him up there. And they're going into a bathroom with a sign right outside the door that says absolutely no sexual activity is permitted. And that's how we know that absolutely some sexual activity is transpiring.
I don't want to say it's subtle. They never spell out exactly what's going on or how much Ruby knows about it, but he's probably making enough money to move out of the garage, I would imagine.
He's spending it on Stratocasters, though.
It's true. Stratocasters aren't cheap.
No.
$330 in 1977 money is a lot of money.
There is a deleted subplot about Richie's girlfriend that explains the broken Stratocaster that highlights his apartment decor.
Yeah, so apparently Idina Menzel filmed quite a few scenes where she played Richie's girlfriend, and they were all cut from the movie. Her subplot was completely removed. But that kind of helped explain some stuff to me. There are scenes of Ruby and Richie where Ruby's trying to get intimate and Richie pushes her away and tells her not now. He's also dancing in a gay club and having sexual interactions with the men there. So you're wondering, is Richie a gay man who is just in the closet? But then later we find out he has a sex life with Ruby. So it appears he's at least bisexual, or he could be gay for pay. We're not sure exactly what the situation is. The movie doesn't spell it out for us. But he may have been dating the Idina Menzel character when Ruby was trying to hook up with him, which would explain his reluctance to do so. And it paints him as more of a noble, significant other than Vinny, who would fuck anybody that was interested in him.
It adds an interesting wrinkle to his character, but at this point, we really can't complain about Spike editing the movie down because we would just really wish he would have done a little more.
And it's better without it, I think. Good call, Spike.
Yeah.
And then there's the scene where Deanna and Vinny decide to go back to the club and it's empty. Vinny seems kind of bummed, but they end up dancing anyway because this movie needed more dance scenes.
Yeah, they had to echo the initial scene where we meet them and they go in the crowded club, take the dance floor. They feel like they're alone. The second time they go back, they're literally alone. It's like this Son of Sam really is fucking up New York small businesses. No one's going out at night because they're scared.
Son of Sam, the original COVID.
Exactly. It hits home. We know this feeling.
You could have plugged that scene into today and it would have made just as much sense for a different reason. And then we get a scene of Deanna trying to please Vinny.
Yeah.
And it's very painful to watch. This is the worst sex scene I've ever seen. But I think that's the point.
I think you're absolutely right. But I need to clarify because I'm pretty sure there's 2 sex scenes in very close proximity between this same couple in this section of the movie.
The blonde wig scene is the second one of the 2, right?
The blonde is the second one, but the first one is this very uncomfortable scene where he's saying, let's get out of town. I'm freaking out over the Son of Sam. She's like, let's stay here. We can have a staycation and still get sexy with each other. And then they have like the least sexy sex, some rabbit humping kind of stuff.
Literal jackhammering for 15 seconds. And then he's like, I'm going to bed.
It's very disappointing.
It felt like he was just trying to get out of the obligation of having to have sex.
It's frustrating for us as the viewers. We're like, dude, look at Mira Sorvino. What are you doing, buddy? You got a gorgeous wife and she's hot for you. And then it gets more frustrating because her dad gives her a blonde wig and says, please wear this to help avoid the killer who's hunting down brunettes. And then they use that for some romantic play in the bedroom. And he almost gets into it. And then he's like, no, I don't do this kind of shit with my wife. It's wrong. It's awful. And she's broken up about it. It's quite a painful scene.
You get like a lot of secondhand embarrassment from these scenes, which again is totally, it's hitting its mark. That's what you're supposed to feel. But also the wig that Arthur Nascarelli gives his daughter is not the wig she's wearing. Like he gave her like a fucking mannequin wig from Party City. And then she's got like this very nice wig on her head later in the scene. So they got creative with the prop department there. Arthur Nascarella. I'm sorry. I don't want to. Also a Sopranos veteran.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's a familiar actor, but I didn't know him.
If there's a movie with like mobsters in it, he's probably been in it sometimes. But I believe he was actually a detective before he became an actor, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Oh,
but just
cool.
Ended up playing mobsters for most of his life. And then we get to the big blackout, which is an effective sequence to be sure, but pretty upsetting and harrowing.
Another history lesson from Spike Lee where he literally steps into frame and says, this is going on in New York. I am the local newscasters bringing you the on-the-ground report from the looting. Quite a scene, and that was pretty real.
I was shocked at the response. I was in New York City for a major blackout, the blackout of 2003, which was a huge situation. And that was not my experience, but New York in 77 versus 2003, very different places. But yeah, this is a famous blackout. This is where the whole Bronx is burning thing started, I believe. I did read that book. I just have forgotten a lot of the details of it. Good book, though.
Oh, okay.
Lee's not great as an actor. He's a little mushmouthed.
He's the comic relief.
He's the comic relief. He's like a punching bag for the residents of the neighborhoods he's always reporting in.
Yeah, he knows how to play that sad sack that people take digs at. And I liked him in this because he does serve a very practical role, giving some color in the background of what's going on in the city. I enjoyed seeing him in this. He knows what he can do. There's a bunch of parallels I started to draw in my mind between him and M. Night Shyamalan. And I'm like,
oh, interesting.
Spike Lee knows how to do cameos, and he's funny and he's entertaining and he's cool in them. And fucking M. Night embarrasses himself almost every time.
He kept trying to cast himself in bigger and bigger roles until finally we got Lady in the Water.
Yeah.
You're literally the man who's going to save the world. Okay. I say Spike's a much better writer than M. Night is. Their acting skills are probably equal, but like you said, Spike gives himself very minor roles. So
yeah, he knows what he can do and he gives himself what he can handle.
I think Tarantino's a better actor than both of them, but I find him more grating because, you know, that's also the role he writes for himself. Yeah. Then I want to talk about this punk performance we get from Richie and Ruby, because as we mentioned, Ruby is now the lead singer of a punk band, which Richie plays guitar in and also sings some songs. Adrien Brody, pretty terrible singer. Jennifer Esposito does a serviceable job.
Sure. Yeah. And for someone who had no aspirations to be in a band at all, she's the lead singer immediately.
Am I misremembering? They're just reading the letter, like one of the Son of Sam letters, as their lyrics, right?
Oh, is that what that was? I missed that. That's wild.
The lyrics to that song are just one of his later letters to police. Hello from the gutters of New York City that are filled with dog manure, stale wine, urine. That whole letter, that's what she's singing, which was an interesting touch.
That's a great touch. I was too distracted. I'm like, wait, what? Why is Ruby on stage? What the fuck is going on? But no, that's a nice little twist.
First, I was like, is that Ruby? And then I was like, why is Ruby there? And then I was like, oh, wait, I know those lyrics. But also, this doesn't ring true as a punk song to me. They have backup singers and guitar solos and stuff. We discussed this off air, but Nevermind the Bollocks and The Clash both came out in 77. But I assume they didn't immediately just land in America and take over New York. It probably took a year or two to really hit the States. I could be wrong about that. So I'm not sure like what version of punk rock we had at this time.
And maybe that's what Spike Lee was going for, that it was some kind of proto-punk, because obviously Adrien Brody's Richie character is very much into The Who, which no one would really say is a punk band, although it might have inspired a certain aesthetic.
And they were kind of past their prime already.
They were mature rockers at this point. Townsend was still smashing guitars. He had to do that the whole time, but they were not that dangerous bunch of kids at this point.
They were still dangerous, but like in a sad way. This is about a year before Moon died, so...
Don't get behind the wheel dangerous.
Don't tap this guy on the shoulder when he's like snoozing. Just wake up and stab you. Yeah, so that could be an anachronism, or it could just be like Spike Lee really researched this and I'm wrong. But it's weird to see like somebody who's so entrenched in the punk rock lifestyle, but kind of behave in a way we've come to understand is antithetical to punk rock.
He's like, my favorite song is Baba O'Reilly, and that just seems like such a sellout.
Yeah, that's like what we would call like real normie shit. Like that's a normie pick.
Yeah.
You need the deep cuts. If you're gonna, I don't know where I'm going with any of this. Just
well, does the movie know where it's going? It's showing us a lot of texture and stuff that doesn't really go anywhere.
I thought this scene was going to be like somebody's going to see him performing these lyrics that are just a Son of Sam letter and be like, oh, more evidence that he's involved in here. But no one sees that performance. Vinny doesn't go. They back out at the last minute, and the Joey T crew is not there yet. So it would have made more sense to have him performing that while they were there, I think. And then you're like, he's just digging his grave even deeper.
That's true. People gin up a lot of very thin evidence against him, and that would have been something they could have used for sure.
To be fair, though, that feels right. People would cling to the most minor coincidences to accuse this guy of terrible things. Like that rings true for what we know about Americans by and large.
That part of the story is pretty compelling.
And then we got to talk about the Plato's Retreat scene, as tough as it is. Vinny and Deanna want to go to 54. They leave CBGB's. She's like, this place skews me out. Don't want to go here. And I understand where she's coming from. They were not dressed for CBGB's. And she says, I want to go to Studio 54. Future episode, by the way. Stay tuned. But they drive to 54, can't get in. But while they're waiting online, some very sleazy gentlemen are like, finally, a beautiful couple. Come with us. Because that's a thing you could do in the 70s. And they end up at Plato's Retreat, which is a real place, famous place, swingers club in New York City. Not quite as poppin' as 54. There's no line to get in. Seems like a more select clientele. And then, do they get drugged or do they just take drugs? I couldn't quite parse how it all went.
I took it as they were uncomfortable, and so they were like, we got to get fucked up. They're already not happy there, and then they get fucked up and it gets worse.
Yeah, but Deanna notably wants to leave before they start getting fucked up, and Vinny says no. Well, he doesn't say no. He passive aggressive. I'm having fun. I don't want to leave, but if you want to leave, we can leave if you want. He throws so many if you wants in there. It's clearly you're gonna ruin my night if you make me leave, but it's okay if you want to, I guess.
Yeah, it's actually a good little piece of writing or improvisation, depending on how that scene might have come together. But he puts her through this thing. They end up staying, and the night goes downhill. They fall into this trap where she's trying to please him, and it backfires incredibly badly for her.
It's shot very well where like they're kind of making out with each other but the cuts are in such a way where it takes you by surprise when you realize they're both with different partners.
That's another nice piece of filmmaking by Spike Lee. You see them, the people around them are already naked and they're lagging behind. And then you're like, okay, now they're finally going for it. And you're like, wait a minute, they're looking at each other from across the room. This ain't right.
I guess 2 minutes had to be cut from this scene to avoid an NC-17 rating. And that's another situation where I feel like Spike's excesses were reined in for the better. I think like the more you show of this, the less powerful it becomes.
Yeah.
So that was a good call. But Mira Sorvino apparently hated filming this. She found it demoralizing. So
yeah, that's a bummer.
We didn't have intimacy coaches on sets back then to help actors deal with scenes like this, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. And fortunately, she's not really shown nude in any of this stuff, which at least you could say that much of her was protected, that she wasn't. But that doesn't change the fact that she was somewhat nude with some actors in a scene with cameras rolling.
Dozens of actors, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where most of the budget went. But then the big argument on the drive home is even worse in some ways because Vinny is just lashing out in a terrible way, calling her a lesbian and a slut. And it's like, man, first of all, you've cheated on her with everyone in your neighborhood, even Ruby. Oh, no, that was before they got together.
Oh, that was before, yeah.
But you pushed her into this. And I'm not saying it's unrealistic because I'm sure those gender politics were very present in 1970s America and to some extent still are today. It just makes it a bummer. Also, nobody told Mira Sorvino that John Leguizamo was going to spit in her face during the argument, which is not a cool thing to do. I don't like this. Like, we're going to try to surprise people to get a reaction out of them, like a genuine response. Like, she should have punched him in the fucking dick and walked off set.
Yeah, I didn't know that until I read that note, and then I did a second watch of the movie, and she does smack him right in the mouth.
It seems like a real smack. Yeah, that's not a film smack.
It feels pretty real. It's a very powerful scene, but then when you know that it was not entirely consensual or considerately prepared for by the actors, it's kind of a shame. I like these people. They have this fight, and it ends in this terrible breakdown in their relationship, but then it ends in this semi-funny drive-off moment, right? Where
John Leguizamo keeps pace with this car for a minute and a half. He's just running by in this car like, baby, no, babe. It's like the scene from Hot Rod with Will Arnett.
Yeah, they're kind of silly, sad people. She gets out one side, he comes after her, she runs around, gets back in, and manages to drive away, which is the humor that happens in real life amidst really painful situations. And like you said, yeah, then they're in the middle of this dirt road through a huge cemetery, and he's chasing the Mustang for quite a while.
Yeah, when like he gets out of the car and then she gets out of the car and runs around the other side, like you could play the Benny Hill theme over that and it wouldn't be out of place.
Yeah.
But it's still a brutal scene. Like, he's so mean to her.
He's so mean. But like that move I thought was good because it doesn't minimize their pain. It actually plants them more in a real reality where people are just sad and stupid shit happens.
Right. People don't say and do the perfect thing when they're that emotionally vulnerable. So it does have the ring of truth to it. I think that's a good call.
And they're also kind of awful, as you pointed out in the notes. There's a lot of homophobic shit in the names that they call each other.
And Deanna goes on like a bit of a racist rant too.
Yeah.
It feels more like she's playing off Vinny's inherent racism by saying like she's going to fuck a black guy because she knew that would get him even more mad. But like, it's good that she's standing up for herself, but it's just unfortunate the ways in which she has to do it to get the rise out of him that she wants is to be homophobic and racist in the process. Yeah. But again, you know, that doesn't feel like it's outside the realm of truth for 1977 or in some ways today.
When you look at the movie as a whole, homophobia is a major theme of this movie because it's a big part of how the Richie character gets in trouble with the crew of people that he's from. And a lot of the characters in this movie are tarnished by it, right? Spike Lee and the writers indict this whole group of people for some of the harsh beliefs and patterns that they're stuck in. So it feels real.
Yeah, Richie is progressive in a lot of ways, and that was a dangerous thing to be, especially around these very backward-thinking groups of people like Joey T and the gang.
Yeah, it was meaningful to me that sex work is treated with a pretty mature perspective for 1999. I wouldn't necessarily have expected Spike Lee to handle it that way. The movie, if you call the movie a thing that has an opinion of its own, it doesn't actually look down on any of the sex work in the movie, which involves a couple different things as it evolves. It doesn't lead to moral repercussions for the people who are participating in it. The movie kind of accepts it. It's only the misguided characters that freak out, and their failures are the problem. The people who don't accept Richie and Ruby for the decisions that they've made are the ones who are indicted by the movie, which I thought was a nice kind of progressive stance for this time period.
Spike Lee did make Girl 6 a few years before this, which is about a phone sex operator in New York City.
okay.
So he had dealt with the topic before, but I do think Girl 6 got some shit for not being as mature or respectful of the profession as it could have been. So it's encouraging to think that maybe he learned from that a little bit and tried to seek out some new perspectives the next time he addressed the topic. And you're right. I didn't even consider how, because sex work is kind of normalized nowadays, but in 1999 and certainly in 1977 where the movie takes place, but it's treated the way it would have been probably back then. But in the movie, he does not condemn these characters for participating in it.
Yeah, not at all.
It's kind of nice to see.
All right, let's see if I can bring us home. So Joey T tries to convince Vinny that his friend Richie is actually the son of Sam, making his case by revealing the recently discovered secret of Richie's sex work. Vinny doesn't want to believe it, but he's getting more and more freaked out. Then things get even worse for him when Deanna learns more details of his cheating and leaves him. Joey then gets Vinny to lure Richie out of his house so that the boys can apprehend him, which Vinny immediately regrets, betraying his friend, as Richie is beaten down in the street by Joey and the boys. But thankfully, Richie's stepfather comes to the rescue, scaring off the boys with a gun and informing them that the real son of Sam has already been arrested.
Fucking Mike Starr throwing 100 miles an hour in this movie. Good for him and his wife in this movie, too. Still having an active sex life at this advanced age, which is probably like 50. It's not that advanced.
There were another set of side characters that maybe we didn't need quite as much of them, but they were entertaining. And I loved how he comes around to be the hero at the end. He's the stepfather who kind of seems like a classic guy who's trying to push the son out, but he comes and rescues the kid at the end. It's great.
Even in the scenes where he is literally pushing Richie into the garage, he was never like a monster.
No, he's a loving man. He has a lot of love for the wife.
Yeah, he seemed like, and even for Richie to some extent, Richie was in his late 20s. Rent was like affordable in New York back then. Like he could afford to move out. Yeah. Nowadays, you probably let your kid live home for a few more years. I moved out when I was 22. That's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Not everyone can be as mature as me.
That's for sure.
That's a joke because I'm not mature at all. But yeah, fucking love the Mike Starr stuff in this movie. We'll get a little bit more into his role at the end when we get to talking about that point. But we got to talk about something we've been alluding to where Spike loses the plot a little bit with the Son of Sam check-ins. Because a famous part of the story is that David Berkowitz got his instructions, or so he would claim for a time, from a 1,000-year-old dog named Hunter.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch the dog's name, but
I don't think they say it in the movie. That I surmised that from auxiliary research.
Oh, sure.
But he said like the dog spoke to him. So what does Spike Lee do? So first of all, Berkowitz has shot this dog at this point. We see him shoot this dog. Maybe. He shoots at the dog. Maybe. But then the dog's there when he gets arrested. I don't know. It's hard to figure out what's real. Anyway, because he say to the dog, like, I thought I killed you or something?
Oh, yeah, maybe. But even the shooting is comical. So we talked about how, the Berkowitz character in this movie is best and scary when he's in the shadow and you're looking over his shoulder, eyeballing some kids.
Little letter block words like murder. Oh, yeah, good for you, buddy. You learned how to spell murder. So
he's writing creepy shit on the wall. He's screaming into his pillow. But then we start to see his face. That was where he really started to jump the shark. And I didn't realize they were going to jump an even bigger shark in the next scene. But he's having this yelling match with his neighbor, who's the owner of the literal black lab, who's outside his window. He's yelling at him, "You never shut up. You're the devil." And then he pulls out this funky old rifle and he shoots it towards camera. We think he's shooting the dog.
We hear whimpering.
It's convincing. It looks like that's what the movie is telling us. He shot the dog. Except for the way that the actor, Michael Badalucco, picks up this rifle and he doesn't even really bring it up to his eye to like sight down it. And he's kind of grinning and he does this funny like shooting gallery thing with the rifle and goes pow. And he doesn't say pow. It makes a gunshot.
Does a flag come out? Like
it should have, because he's kind of grinning and he's shooting it in this cartoon silly way instead of that being scary. Like I feel like there was a missed opportunity there because they show that maybe he's a veteran. He has some experience with guns. His apartment is littered with rifles.
He is a veteran. He was a veteran in real life.
Yeah. So like I wanted it to be scary. When he picks up that rifle, he should sight down it like our buddy Miles did in Bad Times at the El Royale just last week. Like he should be a scary man with a rifle. He should pick it up and look like a pro. But instead he shoots it kind of in a cartoony way. And then that was the beginning of the end for me. But that was not the end for Spike.
It gets so much worse. This dog just walks into his living room, or is it his bedroom? I don't remember. It's not important. He's sitting there talking to himself and this black lab walks in and he's like, "What are you doing here? I thought I killed you." And the dog just starts having a conversation with him. And the dog is voiced by John Turturro.
Classic.
And you pointed out, which is a very good catch, the dog is wagging his tail throughout this entire entire process because you can't tell a black lab not to wag his tail. They're very happy dogs.
This dog is so happy, and it's such a silly 90s talking dog movie for a minute there. There's a little CGI because you can tell that they composited the dog with him, but they couldn't stop his tail wagging, and they couldn't figure out how to rotoscope that out of the shot. And whatever seriousness was left was instantly evaporated by the waggy tail of the good boy.
Look, Air Bud doesn't even start talking till like the 4th movie in his series, and those are comedies for children. So you're going to throw a talking black lab in the 3rd act of this very serious drama. Just a major miscalculation on Spike Lee's part, unless he wanted it to be hilarious, because it's fucking hilarious.
If the murders weren't enough to show you that we're serious here, this is real, people are dying, the relationship drama is now fucking awful. As we've just been telling you, this couple is breaking apart in a very compelling, realistic,
and we're feeling the walls
way.
Closing in on Richie. You know, the other plot, like everything is kind of getting to a boiling point here.
Everyone's life is fucked up, and this is silly. This is levity we did not need.
I don't think it was intentional levity. I can't see it. Why would you do that?
I see why you might try it, but if you did it and you saw it, how it came out, you would think you would go, let's cut that out. We didn't need that scene.
Because you could have him shoot the dog, or not really shoot him. I put that in quotes, not realizing that podcast, mainly an audio medium. And then when he gets arrested, spoiler alert, in case you're not familiar with the Son of Sam, you don't think he's still out there. When he gets arrested, the dog's there. So that could have been your way to be like, this guy's nuts. He thinks he shot this dog, but this dog's fine.
Right.
You don't need this.
Multiple beats of Phantom Dog. We didn't really need him at all, but we definitely didn't need multiple.
He's super cute. I'm happy to see him. Cute little doggy. I won't say doggo. I'm not saying that. I'm not there yet. Yeah, the dog is a miss. It almost undercuts all the setup he did to make Berkowitz seem scary and threatening. He seems like a clown now. He's obviously scary and threatening because he's killing people, but he just seems like a clown. And if that was his intention, then good for him, but I didn't get that vibe.
And talking about misses, I had 2 other things that I wanted to recommend Spike edit out of the 25-year director's cut. There's a lot of montages in this movie. There's a lot of music scenes, dance scenes.
Gonna need a montage.
And there's at least 2 of them that are excessive. What's the word I'm looking for? Something that is
superfluous.
Superfluous. Thank you. 2 superfluous montages. One, it happened a little bit earlier in the last act. There's a Baba O'Reilly music montage. They play pretty much the whole song, and it culminates.
It's a long song.
Yeah.
And Adrien Brody can't cover Daltrey for shit. He sounds like dog shit in that scene.
He's not too good, but that's for me was part of his character that he's kind of not a good musician. He's just a wannabe. Poser. But like Spike Lee uses this to show how fucked up all the characters are. It's only teenage wasteland. They're all wasted. Let me show you how each of them are wasted. And it cuts to each of the neighborhood boys living fucked up lives, getting drunk and falling asleep on the back of a car, beating people up. And like all the characters here get shown. I'm like, we know all that. You showed us that in real life. Don't do a weird Who montage in the middle of the thing. So that felt totally excessive. And then Spike goes, wait a minute, let me inform you. Montages don't have to always be music. Sometimes they can be made out of Yankees play-by-play audio. And they have a montage.
Even less riveting.
Where the killer is struggling. He gets scared off from killing one woman. She screams and picks up her dog and runs away. And he's struggling. And so is Reggie Jackson. He's struggling at the plate. And that's what the play-by-play announcer is talking about. He hasn't had a hit in a while. And neither has Dave Berkowitz. Isn't that unfortunate? And finally, he comes through in the clutch and he kills 2 more people. I'm like, what was that? Why?
Yeah, that's kind of ugly. Yeah, I don't like that. I didn't even draw that comparison because this movie, it does fatigue you. Now, obviously, I was digesting what was going on with Berkowitz, but for my own detriment, I didn't tie it to the montage audio as closely as I should have. But that makes a lot of sense and also is icky.
Yeah, it is icky. And it's weird. No, I totally know what you mean because you're concentrating on the visuals and it just sounds like the Yankees radio is playing over that. But yeah, it's shockingly and grossly literal when you go back and listen to what the play-by-play announcer is saying because Berkowitz's swings and misses time up perfectly with Reggie Jackson.
Can't say I'm a fan of that. All right. I don't know where we go from here, but let's keep on going. Then we get a very pivotal scene in the love story of the movie. Vinny is just spiraling, the weight of thinking that the Son of Sam is after him because he witnessed a murder, his marriage falling apart, although it hasn't completely fallen apart yet. I can't believe Deanna hadn't left him completely by now.
Right.
Feels like the cemetery should have been the final straw. And also, I think he's feeling the pressure. A lot of people are trying to get him to turn over his best friend, Richie, and he shows up to work. He's at least drunk. We don't know what else he's got going on, but probably a few things in his system. And he's trying to cut hair, which is, there's not a lot of jobs you can do well while you're fucked up, but cutting hair is definitely not one of them.
It's dangerous.
You can podcast, but you can't cut hair. I'm not fucked up, by the way. I don't think I've ever podcasted drunk. And this is a very tough scene to watch because he is just lashing out for no reason. Everyone's trying to be nice to him, trying to help him out. Gloria, that he's been having an affair with, they're on good terms at the time. She's
trying to be nice.
Yeah, she's trying to
rein him in.
Go collect yourself, come back when you feel better. He's got regulars there that it's heavily insinuated he's also slept with, just based on our interaction. instructions. And he keeps trying to call this woman over to cut her hair. And people keep like, are you sure? And then he just freaks out, pours his coffee on the salon owner's head, storms out, then walks back in, calls her a stupid bitch for not locking the door, grabs his keys and his whatever else he left there, and leaves again.
Yeah.
And that's where she says, I'm going to fuck your life up, or something along those lines. And you know that the jig is up for him and Deanna at that point.
It's a really good scene. It feels really real again, where he's like saying, okay, Dee, come on over. I'm ready for you. And she's, no, Dee, stay right there. I'm still dealing with Vinny here. There's a bunch of those beats and it feels like a really genuinely fucked up guy. Again, it's a kind of interesting that we talked about the slight humor in the breakup scene where she drives off in the car. This again has this humorous moment where he does this awful shitty thing to her, storms out of the place, realizes he left his keys in there and has to storm back in for another really awkward walk back and forth through the salon. But it's got that real sort of edge to it of, oh, that's funny, but that's so fucked up at the same time.
And then I think maybe the very next scene is he goes home and Deanna's there packing up her stuff. Again, utterly shocked that this hasn't already happened based on, like, she must really
she's a fucking
love
saint.
him.
Yeah, like she's put up with a lot of shit. And even when she blows up at him, she gets mad, but she's a good kid, man. Like,
she's very tender to him even when she's leaving him. She's
just disappointed.
It's really what it is. It's, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. Because he says all these grand proclamations and she just says, I just don't believe you, which, you know, is brutal but correct.
Yeah, she's disappointed and heartbroken. You feel like she really loved this guy and wanted to make it work, and he fucked it up every time.
He's not going to get better by just trying real hard. Like, he needs serious, deep therapy. And unfortunately, it was actually illegal for Italians to go to therapy until 1999 when The Sopranos came out.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he wasn't allowed to go. So it's a very dark period in America we don't talk about.
Yeah, what a spot he was in.
Couldn't do it. Straight to jail. But yeah, like, he has deep-seated sexual problems. Or not problems, you know, kinks aren't necessarily problems, but he's just trying to suppress them to such an extent that it's impacting his life in very negative ways. And kinks aren't problems when you have consenting partners to partake in them. You just have to go about it in a responsible way, and that's not what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that he craves this kind of sex. It's that he can't imagine getting it from his wife, who wants to have that sex with him, who wants to explore that stuff with him, and he refuses to do that with her, and he goes outside for it. That's the tragedy of it.
The movie is very interested in scapegoating as well, which we talked about, and part of this might be like, this is his excuse to step out. That's how he rationalizes it to himself. I can't do these things with my wife, so I got to go find other. Like, how much of that does he really believe, and how much of that is him just trying to justify going outside his marriage?
That would be a good rationalization, but his gut reactions when they attempt that in the wig scene feel really real too. So it feels like he really has a deep-seated hang-up that he can't get over.
It's a very 3D character. It's good that we can have these discussions about, what does he really mean by this? There's not a lot of surface level emotion with these characters. They do feel like fully fleshed out people.
Yeah, and I was going to say he has this hang-up that he can't get over yet, because I was thinking of this as like a traditional film where the hero will discover a way to get past his deepest flaw. He does not. This is a tragedy. He ends by fucking ruining it all. There's no coming around for him.
Deanna's left him, and he sets up Richie to be beaten by this group, so Richie's never going to want to be his friend again. We don't really see him have family.
That's true.
In the neighborhood. We don't know anything about his family, as far as I could tell.
That's a good point.
He's lost his job, his wife, and his best friend in the third act of this movie. He's got nothing left, and he seems to be developing a pretty strong cocaine habit. It's probably not going to help matters.
What a great setup for season 2. I hope HBO renews it.
Well, season 2 will be the doc season, and then season 3 will deal with politics. No, that was a Wire reference. Now let's talk about the big climactic fight at the end of the movie. Did it feel a little like abrupt to you? How maybe it's true to life that it was kind of so rinky-dink, but like, he just gets hit in the face 2 or 3 times, and then his dad comes out with a gun and is like, no, they arrested him already, you dipshits. And then it's like, it felt like it was building up to this guy getting killed or really brutally maimed. And it feels more real that it's not, because these guys are fuck-ups. And even though that might have been their intention, like, they're very sloppy about it all.
It was enough, you know, his face is covered in blood and he gets beat down by his friends, right? The neighborhood guys that he grew up with.
Right.
So it's a huge emotional betrayal, even if thankfully they didn't actually murder him in the street, which, I mean, it's a tragedy because, like we said, Vinny at the center of it loses everything. It's actually hopeful for Richie because although he got his mouth bashed in, his girl and his family rushed to his side and were the ones who defended him. So he ends up being tighter than ever with his circle.
You know what is actually something just came to me was that Richie is true to himself throughout the movie, and he goes through a lot of shit for it, but he ends up, like you said, with a support system of his family and his girlfriend around, whereas Vinny is actively trying to suppress who he really is the whole time, and he ends up with nothing.
Pretty good message. Yeah. Kind of just unlocked a pretty cool meaning out of this movie.
Maybe it's not so bleak after all. Just don't take your wife to Plato's retreat and everything will be okay.
But wait a minute. This all sounds really deep and emotionally moving and interesting, but I thought when Jimmy Breslin Breslin came on screen, he explained that the real ending of this movie was that they caught the son of Sam and he went to jail and he got this many sentences and then the Yankees won the World Series. I'm like, what the fuck, Jimmy? We were just watching an awesome emotional story about these people. What are you talking about? I don't care about how the Yankees finished that year.
These scenes are so weird. I thought the intro was enough. I'd forgotten about the intro 5 minutes later, so I was like, whatever. But yeah, like that's really what you want, like the final lasting image of your movie to be. Just this old white guy yelling at us.
It's an awesome Shakespearean tragedy. We made the comparison to West Side Story earlier because it kind of feels like it with the group of guys. And that obviously connects back to Romeo and Juliet, these people that are motivated by fear and hatred and winds up into this outburst of violence that ruins lives. And then, no, they beat the Dodgers that year.
Reggie Jackson hit 3 home runs. All right, Grandpa, let's get you to bed. No disrespect to Jimmy Breslin. I'm sure he's dead now. But yeah, he died in 2017.
Rest in peace, Jimmy.
Rest in peace. He was a good writer, yes. I don't know. What am I talking about?
I don't know. He's a famous name for some reason.
All right, so that was Summer of Sam. I think we're both in the pro column on this movie, but there is definitely some stuff that could have been done differently. Not only in the storytelling, but in the making of it that would have made it a little less painful for some of the people involved. Literally, for Adrien Brody, who got his nose broken during that big beatdown scene. And
yikes.
For Mira Sorvino, who did not enjoy her time on the movie. Do you want to hear where everyone involved in this movie went? What they're up to now?
Yeah, it's been a while.
So Spike Lee, we talked about his misses. I say misses from the box office point of view, but like he had some great movies in that stretch in the early to mid 90s. Clockers, which I know you checked out a little bit of and enjoyed. Big fan of the book. I like the movie as well. Is that Mekhi Phifer in the lead role there? Good actor.
A very young Mekhi Phifer.
Another Torturo role in there, playing the detective. He Got Game, I'm a big fan of as well. After this movie, he would do Bamboozled, which was a huge financial loss. Bamboozled is an infamous movie, one we may have to cover one day, but yeah, it's a major footnote in Hollywood history. Then he would do 25th Hour with Ed Norton in 2002. It's a movie I quite like. Okay. Another one of those examples I was talking about that feels very much like a real studio movie, but he manages to put his flourishes in it. There's a very famous monologue from Ed Norton's character towards the end of that movie where he kind of sums up all the groups in New York City. If you've never seen 25th Hour, I recommend it. I think you'd really like it.
I gotta check it out.
Then he did She Hate Me, which was a big bomb for him. But then Inside Man was a big hit in 2006. Inside Man rules. He followed that up with Miracle at St. Anna, huge bomb, and a movie I still haven't seen to this day, and I really want to. War movie, outside his comfort zone probably, but he would return to that a little later with better success. And then Red Hook Summer was a very limited release, so the financials to that one are opaque. I can't really say if they were expecting to make money with it. Then he made a remake of Old Boy, which to this day is one of the most ill-conceived endeavors I can think of in recent Hollywood memory. The Josh Brolin, Elizabeth Olsen starring Old Boy remake, which we do have on the schedule because...
I'm looking forward to revisiting that because I feel like I enjoyed it, but now I feel like I'm not supposed to have enjoyed it.
You're definitely not supposed to have enjoyed it, but I wonder if you had no knowledge of the original, maybe you would just like it on its own merits.
Well, I think I watched the original too. I somehow enjoyed it on its own terms.
Okay.
I don't know.
You might be
I've been
right.
known to enjoy weird shit.
You can like a movie that most people don't. Lord knows I have a list of a few. So yeah, but I'm excited to revisit it too because I have not seen it since it was released. Chirac then came out. That was the first film to ever be produced by Amazon Studios.
Oh.
So it got a limited theatrical release. So again, he got paid for that. You can't really judge it by the box office because it was a streaming release. And then Black Klansman was a return to theaters. That was a big hit. A movie I quite enjoyed as well.
A lot of Oscar noms in that one, right?
Yeah, a lot of Oscar noms. And then his next movie got a decent amount of Oscar noms too, I believe. The Five Bloods, which was one of the final Chadwick Boseman performances. Quite good. And Delroy Lindo is just a powerhouse. And his work with Lee is always top notch. The writers of the movie were Victor Colicchio. I must have called him Vincent 5 times in this episode, so my apologies to Victor Colicchio.
Sorry, Vic.
I assume no relation to Tom Colicchio of Top Chef fame. His only other writing credit is something called High Times Potluck, whatever that is. And Michael fucking Imperioli wrote this movie, which is, I had no idea going into it. He would also go on to write a few episodes of The Sopranos and a movie he starred in and directed called The Hungry Ghosts, which I had never heard of and will probably never find. I'm not going to seek that out.
All right.
As for Adrien Brody, he was still a few years early for his Academy Award-winning turn in The Pianist. Not The Penis.
Okay. No.
Pianist.
Not at all The Penis.
He was in a bunch of shit for a few years. Like he was working nonstop. I feel like his career had a bit of a slump where he was still working regularly, but maybe not in the same level of movies. He was working with some direct-to-video stuff or direct-to-streaming stuff, which he was considered like a major leading man for a few years, so it felt like a step down. But he's had a bit of a renaissance recently. He's playing Pat Riley on Winning Time, doing a good job there.
Oh, okay. I got to see that.
He was on Succession, and he may come back. He was a guest star, but his character basically seems like somebody who could reoccur quite frequently. He's always been in Wes Anderson movies. He kind of looks like Wes Anderson's wet dream as far as like what a leading man should look like, which weirdly. It's just like Jason Schwartzman, but a little more weathered. He's playing Arthur Miller in Andrew Dominik's Blonde, the Marilyn Monroe biopic. It's coming to Netflix in the fall.
Oh,
And he'll be in See How They Run, which seems like a fun Knives Out ripoff, coming out, I think, late this year.
okay. That sounds fun.
Yeah, I'll check that out. And he's got 3 more movies, either in post-production or filming, so he's clearly staying busy. Leguizamo has never stopped working, 62-year-old man that he is, which is fucking mind-blowing to me. He's in the John Wick series. He was in the first 2. He wasn't in the third one. I hope he comes back for the 4th. I like his character in those. He's in that movie, The Menu, which we talked about at the end of Downsizing.
Oh, no, I got it. Yeah.
That's coming out real soon. I think that's coming out like in a couple weeks, maybe.
Got a lot of reasons to watch that one now.
Yeah, Anya Taylor-Joy, fun premise. One of the Fiennes bros.
Okay.
He was Bruno in Encanto, and the guy you don't talk about.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was on The Mandalorian. He's staying busy. He's made some duds in his time, but Titan
Sure.
AE. He's always kind of alternated good and bad in his career, but he's working. And he does, I don't know if he's still very active in stand-up, but he was for many years. He's a talented guy.
Kind of a force in Hollywood, and maybe an overlooked one.
Yeah, Mira Sorvino works steadily, but like Brody, she was kind of pegged to be the next big thing, and it didn't quite pan out. But unlike Brody, her decline was because of a shitbag dude, Harvey Weinstein. She reportedly denied his advances, and he went out of his way to tell every director he could find not to work with her. She was up for some role, I believe it was the role of Arwen in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, much like
Wow.
Ashley Judd was, and Peter Jackson was talked out of even meeting with her by Harvey Weinstein. Who
That's
knows
fucked.
how many other situations like that there were with her. She's a very solid actress.
Yeah.
Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion was a childhood favorite of mine. With
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Lisa Kudrow.
Delightful.
Jennifer Esposito, she's done some film roles, but she's really like a TV mainstay. Spin City was where I first recognized her from and probably fell in love with her. She was on Judging Amy, Samantha Who, Blue Bloods, Mistresses, The Affair, The Boys. She was on a few episodes of The Boys. Nora from Queens. It seems like she's based mostly out of New York because a lot of these shows filmed in New York. I used to have trouble parking my car because Blue Bloods was always filming in my fucking neighborhood. So
Oh, shit.
I couldn't park on the street. So yeah, I'm assuming she just kind of lives around there and takes jobs that keep her close to home most of the time.
Sounds like a good life.
It does, right? And TV shooting they've usually got it down to a science. It's a little less chaotic than film sets, I think.
Yeah.
When you join a show in like its 4th season, they know what they're doing by then. So this movie debuted the same weekend as Wild Wild West, which we mentioned in the monologue. It made just under $8 million, opened in 8th place. That's not great. And then the next week, American Pie and Arlington Road premiered, and it would drop down to 10th and basically disappeared from there. It only ended up making $19 million. The D- on Cinema Score is really the telltale sign about what went wrong here, though.
That's wildly low. I mean, that's so low that
Do you suspect shenanigans?
Do I need to call shenanigans and press the shenanigans button?
You might have to press the shenanigans button.
Shenanigans.
Let's be honest, especially in 1999, like anytime audiences were rating a Spike Lee movie, you were going to get some racist white guys just rating it low just because they hate him, which is a sad state of affairs, but unfortunately all too familiar. So that was probably part of it. But also, this movie was marketed to be much more of a serial killer thriller drama. That's not the movie we got. Misleading advertising is always a good way to lose favor with audiences.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to put myself in those shoes. If you thought you were just going to see serial killer cop drama and you saw a thing that had these themes in it, which are pretty mature, and not everyone who's in for cop dramas is in for sex work, marital infidelity kind of movies. So I get that. I was ready for everything this movie threw at me, and that's the part that I liked, was the part that everyone probably hated. And I just wanted them to trim back more of the cop stuff. But if you went for a cop movie, you could be freaked out by this.
Also, I guess it's important to note how recent the Son of Sam killings were when this movie came out. It was 21 years after the fact. We're further removed from the movie being released now by quite a bit than they were from the killing back then. 20 years is not a ton of time for such a kind of tragic series of events to dramatize. I know we made like 5 9/11 movies within 3 or 4 years of 9/11 happening, but that was such a large scale tragedy. It felt less personal to like the victims.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was more of our business in that sense, that it was a tragedy that affected a lot of people personally, but a lot of people in a bigger national sense. So there was something to speak to. Whereas this tragedy, when it becomes national, it's still kind of sensationalism because you didn't live there, you didn't get killed, your family wasn't at risk. You're just enjoying the salaciousness of serial murders, which is popular as ever in this country.
Oh, true crime is, a booming industry.
Both the murdering and the true criming of it all.
The movie did make it seem like the Bronx was like the place where all these shootings happened. Most of these shootings happen in Queens, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Forest Hills, Van Buren year in high school. One of them happened in my hometown of Flushing, right in Bound Park, where I used to go with my high school girlfriend and make out, not to brag.
Damn.
But so it was strange seeing them kind of treat. I understand it makes a lot more sense to the story to have it centered in this one neighborhood so everyone can kind of really freak out. And there were people shot in the Bronx, but the movie makes it seem like it was only in the Bronx until that one shooting in Brooklyn where John Jeffries goes out to talk to the residents of Bed-Stuy. I think that could be part of the backlash too, is like you're sensationalizing it and you're also like taking liberties with these people who really died's stories.
You're making it about this specific set of people, and plenty of people could go, it shouldn't be about them because it's about my family. You open yourself up to some attack.
So I think there was a backlash to the movie before it was even released. Misleading advertising. Spike Lee was not a commercial juggernaut at the box office at this time, or ever really in his career. He certainly had huge hits, but he's always been kind of up and down in that sense. So I'm not shocked the movie didn't do well. I am shocked it hasn't gotten like its big critical reevaluation. It feels like we're due for a renaissance for this movie.
Yeah, it's got everything you need to merit lifting it back up and taking a look at it. I'm glad we looked at it.
Me too. Did you have any closing thoughts, or did you kind of give us your big summary during the episode?
I did my big summary, but let me give you my little smaller thing that I take away from this movie. And the reason that it is meaningful to me is that I think really for all the extra stuff that's going on, this is a great portrait of what it's like to be a young adult, dealing with your life, dealing with your friendships in your 20s, how you can be a fucked up person, your friends can be fucked up people. You all kind of know that, but you don't know how to solve your problems. So you all just kind of deal with each other's messiness. And to me, that part where it's just like Richie and Vinny trying to have heart-to-hearts and they're each talking about the things that they're dealing with, it just felt really real. And as a guy too, thinking about the way young men relationships work, that stuff all felt really real to me. And also like how there was all this big shit going on in the world, but these 20-somethings made it all about themselves. Like it really was their lives and their problems that just overwhelmed them, and they couldn't handle those, let alone what was going on in the big world. I liked all that about it. I thought it was a really good movie about people in their 20s.
That's a very good point about how kids in their early 20s always find a way to make things about themselves. Vinny literally thinks the Son of Sam killer has it out for him specifically and nobody else.
Exactly.
When he's only shot brunette women and their boyfriends up to that point. Yeah, very astute. But again, this movie is certainly flawed. I do recommend it. It is not at all what I was expecting, and I think that's a good thing. We've got David Fincher. How many serial killer movies do we really need?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was Summer of Sam. Thank you guys so much for listening. We already asked you to rate, review, subscribe at the top, so I won't bother you with that again. But exciting film coming up next week. It's the Boondock Saints.
Oh my gosh.
Before you guys listen to the episode, if you were a big fan of the Boondock Saints when you were like 13, just do me a favor and go watch it before you yell at us. Because if it's been a while, you might not remember it as much as you think.
And if you haven't seen it, I will be your audience surrogate because I managed to miss it all these years and I'm coming in fresh and I'm ready for just a really fun action movie.
Also, if you have seen it, if you have not seen Overnight, the documentary about the making and release of the Boondock Saints, it is for free on Tubi and Plex, Pluto TV right now, and Crackle as well. So there's a lot of free places you can watch this documentary about Troy Duffy trying to get the movie made and then trying to get it distributed after he had it made. Highly recommend it as a companion to Boondock Saints. It really helps fill in the story of what happened with the movie. And we will be obviously referencing it a lot in our episode.
Can't wait to watch the movie so I can watch the documentary.
Yeah, I'd say start movie first, then documentary, or else you'll poison the well and you'll just hate the movie because of the person who made it. All right. Thanks so much for listening, guys. We will see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.